Football 2019 talk. I'm also live on Instagram trying to get you peeps over to the YouTube channel. If you're not already, youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow. For you YouTube people, make sure you also are following on Instagram at The Fantasy Football Show. So live here on YouTube to talk with you guys and discuss fantasy football sleepers, fantasy football breakouts, busts, all kinds of stuff, all kinds of goodness for 2019 fantasy football. Let me see if I can get my comment section up here so I can talk with you guys. Where is that at? I just closed it. Okay. Let me copy this URL and also send it out to my peeps on the Fantasy Football Forum. So if you're not on sleeperu.com, you need to be, because not only do we have one of the best fantasy football forums in the fantasy football industry, and the best tools and fantasy football rankings that are year-round, we have one of the best communities of people. Live on youtube.com now. Join the live stream. So I'm going to paste this link in there. Get these people on here. All right, so what do you guys have to talk about? What do you want to talk about for the remainder of this little show we're going to do here? Sleepers, breakouts, bold predictions. What you got? And I'll leave you guys up on Instagram for a bit, so if you have any questions, you can toss them out. Zay Jones breakout, maybe, yeah. I mean, not bad. Not a bad person to go after, but it depends on the value. So Zay Jones could be, very cheap. His ADP could rise. Currently, I think he's a very sneaky bench wide receiver, not a guy you're starting in your fantasy league, but somebody that's on your bench hoping that he breaks out. So definitely think that's a potential. You guys on YouTube, you guys see me okay on YouTube? Any of you guys on Instagram pulling it up and make sure everything's streaming right? Juwan Howard talked about that earlier on the Instagram live stream and the impact that trade has for all the players on both teams, the Bears and the Eagles. I think that Jordan Howard, what's going on, Oliver? Jordan Howard has, I think, very good running back 3 flex appeal, but if you have to pay like high-end running back 2 numbers, I'm running for the hills, or I'm taking another player that has less risk. But I think that he has a very good flex value. Jordan Howard could be the bell cow, sure, but he very easily could be the next Jay Ajayi, where they don't deploy and use the running back correctly. Do I think it's safe to take Todd Gurley number 1.01, says Nick, who is joking, because Nick knows that I do not like Todd Gurley in 2019. I've been preaching it since January, partly in December, but really in January. I know you're kidding, Nick. But I actually went on here. You can see in one of my live streams from the past, I went on and said, no Todd Gurley, no Todd Gurley, no Todd Gurley, 5,000 times in a row. It took me over an hour and a half. I just said it nonstop for an hour and a half, as part awareness for not drafting Todd Gurley in 2019. Knee issues, history of knee issues. The same knee that he had ACL surgery in has arthritis in it. They were very deceptive about how healthy he was, all at the end of the offseason. I'm sorry, in the playoffs. They were very sorry. I had an error pop up on my screen there, making sure I was still streaming live. Threw me off. Where was that? Todd Gurley. Very easy to get back in tune with that conversation because I've talked about it so much. It's like riding a bike for me. So he didn't look good the last time we saw him play. Yeah, no Todd Gurley. So Oliver, you know that. Nick, you know that. All of you know that. It's funny, I still get a lot of comments. Why not? Why you sit down on Todd Gurley? So unfortunately, I have to continue to say it. Thank you, Nick. Okay, so Instagram, are you over on YouTube? Because eventually the Instagram feed, I think I'm going to cut. Make sure you're on youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow. YouTube, you guys are saved. This stream is actually for you because we did a whole hour on Instagram earlier today. But ready to talk bold predictions, busts, breakouts, whatever you guys want. Right now, I am yours. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to talk about your drafts, your leagues, your trade topics. you got any trades cooking up? A couple good conversations I've had with people already today on some live streams and in some chats about getting rid of players like Connor, getting rid of players like Todd Gurley, and making sure you're getting enough, because I hate it when I get a message from somebody that says, I traded James Conner, like you said, and they tell me they didn't do well. And I actually have a user that did really well. I thought his initial trade was not going to be a good one, but he ended up cleaning up on it, I think, pretty good. So there's all kinds of ways to sell high on players that have high value. So Connor has super high value, top 9 overall player. You'll have no problem trading him in for a safer version of him at the running back or wide receiver position. But he's definitely a player I'm not super high on, given all the things that I've talked about so many times. Todd Gurley and James Conner, I beat a dead horse on. I might go on YouTube live stream here and talk about James Conner more and do a maybe 10,000 times no James Conner. And the funny thing is, I don't dislike James Conner. He was on my bold prediction list for 2018, number 2 on the bold prediction list. But it's all about value. It's all about paying too much for a player when the upside and the risk they don't make sense. A player like Antonio Brown at the bottom of the second makes a lot of sense because he can be top 5 at his position, but you're getting him at 18 to 22 overall value. That screaming deal. Devonta Freeman, Connor, we talked about that. I'm glad you brought that up because the YouTube audience may not have heard that. Devonta Freeman's one of the biggest breakout or bounce back candidates for 2019 and one of the biggest value grabs in the 3-4 round range, because he's one of the last players in that 4th round as a running back that has top 5 to 10 potential at his position. So you're looking at a lot of risk, yes, of course, but that risk is not the same as it was when you were counting on him to be a top 5 running back in 2018. So it's very funny when people don't adjust their risk and reward meter, if you will, and they don't know how to reset or recalibrate the thinking of when they're, okay, this guy's a risk, he's a risk. As ADP keeps falling and the scales tip and he goes from high risk to low risk and to huge upside, but yet everybody holds that same tag of, oh, Devonta Freeman's an injury risk, he's not worth it. And I say Devonta Freeman could be a top 5 to 10 running back wrapped up inside the value of a 4th round pick. But then what you have is people say things like, their first response to a video or a meme that I post or whatever is, oh my God, no way I'm drafting him as a top 5 to 10 running back. And I'm like, did you read the comment? Did you watch the video? I said wrapped up in a 4th round value. So Derrick Henry, Devonta Freeman, probably 2 of the biggest steals in the 4th round in 2019, early mock drafts and early consensus rankings and data, because these 2 guys can be top 5 to 10 at their position. Derrick Henry has a ton of risk, of course, but he also had some monster games and was misused all season long. He was used a little bit, then he wasn't. Big stretch of games where he wasn't utilized or used, and his yards per carry were through the roof. 1,000 yards and an insane amount of touchdowns for a guy that everybody says didn't do anything all year. He finished with a huge season given the usage. So Derrick Henry and Devonta Freeman are awesome running backs to add to your roster if you're deploying a wide receiver Patrick Mahomes strategy, which is one of my favorite strategies for 2019. I'm going to deploy that strategy for all of you, YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. And I'm going to do that in probably an auction so I can guarantee that I'm going to be able to pull it off. But I'm going to go Mike Thomas and DeAndre Hopkins, Patrick Mahomes, and then deploy my sleeper running back store approach where I just literally stack the best redraft rookies, the best Tarik Cohens and James Connors of this year, Jalen Samuels ironically being this year's version of James Conner, I believe. A lot of players that'll fit the bill for that type of breakout sleeper potential. But in that strategy, in a snake draft, if you go wide receiver Mahomes in the 3rd round, which I think is a steal, and we can have that topic again because I know we talk about it a lot. A lot of you guys that follow me a lot probably get tired of hearing it, so I apologize. But when you go Mahomes in the 3rd round, you get a Freeman maybe even a Derrick Henry in the top of the fifth, or if you can make a trade and move your fifth into the fourth and have 2 fourth-rounders. So you go wide receiver, Mahomes, Devonta Freeman, and then somehow get Derrick Henry. You have 2 potential top 5 running backs on your roster, top 5 to 10, on your roster in the Freeman and Derrick Henry, who I'm not saying are guaranteed locks of any kind to be a top 5 to 10 running back. But you can get those 2 running backs when you've gone wide receiver, Mahomes. Insane. And back to Mahomes, the only reason I'm not taking Mahomes in the 3rd round in every single draft I have to go against the grain and ruffle all the feathers in the fantasy football industry, oh, you don't take a quarterback early. The quarterback pool is deep. That makes sense. I'm okay with you waiting on a quarterback because the quarterback pool is deep. I'm okay with that. But when a guy can score 50 touchdowns, which might be your argument against Mahomes, and with Tyreek Hill maybe being suspended, maybe not, I could see where you might value that different, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with differing opinions. But when a guy can score 45 to 50 TDs, and he has that potential, and you get him in the 3rd round and you call him a reach because other people are letting QBs fall, and because the QB pool of the Ben Roethlisbergers are so deep, and the Tom Brady, and we're talking about, I think, generational fantasy QBs in Mayfield and Mahomes, and I think still in Aaron Rodgers, who I think will bounce back and have a 40 to 45 TD season under a new regime, getting back to what works for the Packers offense, and I think getting more of a rushing game going in Aaron Jones. These three quarterbacks, I think, are head and shoulders above the rest in 2019. Breeze could slip in there, and that would be a good value pick, and that's why I'm not against waiting on a QB. But it's crazy to say that drafting Patrick Mahomes in the 3rd round is crazy when you can get a Derrick Henry in the 4th round, let's say, or top of the 5th or whatever. And I'm looking at the board here, Lindsey, let's say, or whoever you want with Mahomes. And instead you could talk about, oh, well, if I waited on my QB and I got my QB later, well, to me that's very comparable. And if you land your player in the 4th or 5th and you get Mahomes, you hit a home run. Let me see if I got any questions out there that I haven't answered. Devontae Parker, no real feeling one way or the other. I think he's had a lot of time to impress us and hasn't, so I'm not going to hold out hope that he does really well. Do a whiteboard NFL mock draft. That would be fun, and I think I've thought about that, and I haven't got around to do it because my list of things to do is just endless. So thank you for the reminder, Nick. Oliver. I'll definitely look into that. Can you name some sleeper running backs? So let me pull up some rankings here that I have on sleeperu.com, and I'll give you some running back sleepers that I think could be very deep. I could give you some that are I think bigger names that people are sleeping on. I think it's funny that I oftentimes see people say that I'm calling somebody a sleeper and you can't call a sleeper. I disagree. I'll define it however I want. Been doing this for 15 years. I call sleepers anybody that's being slept on. So if somebody's sleeping on a Dalvin Cook in the 2nd round because he has top 5 running back upside, he's a sleeper. He's a breakout candidate this year, and I think also a sleeper. People are sleeping on him. People were sleeping on David Johnson, but now he's climbing up into like the 1.12 to 2.03 range. Derrick Henry, Freeman, again, as I mentioned, guys that I think are being slept on. Aaron Jones is now falling into a very good range that I approve of. I'm up and down on players, and that happens when you're honest with your own evaluation. That's what I'm talking about, learning how to reset and recalibrate your thinking. There's nothing wrong with someone flip-flopping on the value of a player if the driving force behind that flip-flopping is their ADP. Everything is about ADP data. Everything. If you think that you can get away with drafting based on how you predict things to go only, you're going to get worked in your draft. You have to go off ADP data. If you don't know ADP data, you're going to get left behind. ADP data is so critical because if you know that Derrick Henry is going in the 4th round, you know to wait on drafting Derrick Henry in the 4th round. If you know Todd Gurley is going in the top 8 and you're not going to draft Todd Gurley, you're believing what I'm selling, that he's the biggest risk in fantasy football, then you have an advantage because you know somebody else is going to make him their problem and take him in the top 8, bumping one of your guys that you like better down. So maybe you make a trade. Knowing ADP is the key to everything in fantasy football. The only other thing you have to master to become an elite fantasy football player is your talent evaluation process, knowing how to hit and land your own picks. That is the thing that takes 10 years to master. Not really, but it can. I mean, you're always perfecting it. You're never an expert on it, but I think that it's definitely something that takes some time. Instagram, jump over to youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow to join in on this. Kerryon Johnson has some sleeper appeal. I think his ADP will drop because news came out recently, I think as of today or yesterday, that they're going to limit his usage, so that could decrease his value. But Aaron Jones was going, as I was saying, and got sidetracked, Aaron Jones was going really, really high. People were almost bumping him into low second round value for running backs, top 5 to 10 breakout. And then news came out that they might do more of a running back by committee approach in Green Bay in 2019, so it dropped him down, and now he's almost a 4th round pick, a top of the 4th. That is a steal. People will be sleeping on Aaron Jones at that value. I don't like him at the bottom of the 2nd because of that running back by committee risk, but I love Aaron Jones in the 4th round value as a 4th drafted player. Tarik Cohen no longer will be a sleeper because the departure of Jordan Howard is going to make him skyrocket, but I think the Bears may be interested in drafting a running back in the draft here in April, so we'll see where his value goes. Another sleeper would be a lot of people like Darius Geis. I think it's a good pick, but depending on where his value is come draft day. Tevin Coleman, talked about this with user What the Crap Man, one of my longest time users at sleeperu.com, and we talked about that earlier on Instagram. And Tevin Coleman is getting drafted around the Lamar Millers and players like I'd say Fitzgerald, Emmanuel Sanders. That's a great deal for a running back that might still have the upside to become a top 10 to 15 running back. Royce Freeman has some sleeper appeal. Josh Adams will have some appeal depending on what happens in Philadelphia. I think that there are some sleepers in like Ballage. There's a lot of rookie sleepers. I think this year will be the year that a bunch of those rookies you can get late because they may be drafted into cloudy situations. So I think that it'll be a good year to stash rookie running backs in redraft leagues because you might have those like Kamara types hidden in value that's a little bit cloudy. If you remember back, Alvin Kamara was on the bold predictions, I believe in the top 5 or 6 on my bold prediction list for his rookie year. And he was kind of on everybody's radar for maybe being a guy that could be a sleeper, but there's a lot of cloudiness around his situation, and we predicted top 5 running back numbers and nailed that one pretty good. I think there are a few gems in this 2019 NFL rookie running back class, and I think that you can stash and use these guys in your league and really clean up. Any other questions you guys got, throw my way, but I am definitely on board with the early QB, early being 3rd round for Patrick Mahomes strategy, or the Aaron Rodgers in the 4th. He's got an ADP of like 4.12. Amazing value for Aaron Rodgers, a guy that can win you your league at that value. We'll see where Baker Mayfield's ADP kind of levels in at. I think Baker Mayfield is a guy that could go in the 4th round if the hype builds, but usually he's, I'd see, an uptick by now if it's going to hit that range. But I think 5th, 6th, he could go anywhere in there, and I think that Mayfield could be the 2nd or 3rd best fantasy QB in 2019. It's Rodgers, Mayfield, and Mahomes. Not sure which order, but I think Mahomes needs to get the benefit of the doubt in that ranking and be your top QB, and very worthy of that 3rd round pick. And if news comes out about Hill, and Hill ends up being suspended, or there's some bad news brewing, you might see Mahomes slip into the top of the 4th, but probably not. Don't expect it. I think if anything, the news might have made him fall into the 3rd from the 2nd. And kind of funny, people say that you can't take him early, but yet his ADP is showing that high. If you're in a 6 point per TD league, then of course you want to consider him at the top of the 3rd no matter what, if not the bottom of the 2nd. But that's me. That's how I draft. And that's another thing is I wanted to say is draft to your strengths and weaknesses. Don't listen to other people that tell you, you have to go tight end early, or going tight end early is bad. Those both are dumb approaches to giving people advice in fantasy football. everybody has a strength and a weakness when it comes to building a team and being a fantasy football manager. I myself, I won't say that I do horrible with it. I think I can win pretty much any way, but probably the hardest struggle for me is building a team when I draft a tight end early. It just makes for, it doesn't let me build a team that I think I build through sleepers and the best approach. So David Njoku is one of my biggest breakout tight ends for 2019 at the tight end position, and I think he could be a top 4 or 5 tight end in fantasy football in 2019 in Cleveland with Baker Mayfield. Baker, touchdown maker, throwing him the football. And those are the things that I like to nail and get, the challenges of finding that next elite tight end. Jimmy Graham, I wrote on Fantasy Pros back during his going into, I believe, his rookie year and second year. I forget which year I wrote it. It's been a while since Jimmy Graham was the best fantasy football tight end. But Jimmy Graham, I wrote on that, and Fantasy Pros highlighted that in one of their articles, that I was the only expert that had him way head and shoulders above the rest. So I really do well and love landing sleeper tight ends. Also sleeper running backs. I'm very solid at that, and so it plays to my strength to build a team and do like a wide receiver Patrick Mahomes, and then have my stash of awesome running backs. I also like doing the two-headed monster, because if sleepers, I mean, look at Sleeper U, that's what I name it after. If that's what I do, and if breakouts and bold predictions are what I do best, naturally I'm going to go with trading up, getting a two-headed monster, a three-headed monster, getting a Zeke Elliott and a Kamara on the same roster. That's probably my second, or tied for my first favorite strategy. The wide receiver Mahomes is probably number one, but going in an auction, Kamara, Elliott, and Mahomes, or Kamara, Elliott, Mayfield, or Kamara, Elliott, Aaron Rodgers, that's probably my second favorite approach, if not tied for my first favorite approach, because I'll land sleeper wide receivers. Get the Robert Woods of this year. Get the receivers that can step up and deliver. You know, Ridley, I'm not saying Ridley will be a value guy. He's probably going to go really high. Chris Godwin, had him a few videos on him being an absolute beast in 2019, being, totally slept on, and now news breaks that suggests he could be 100, catch wide receiver in that Arians offense in a Larry Fitzgerald type role. Now his value is through the roof. But those are the guys you get on a team like that, and it's a challenge. I love the challenge. I'm not saying I'd rather win, or I'd rather lose trying something that I'm having a blast with than winning, in a way that doesn't have fun appeal to me. So I'm not saying I always take the crazy approach, but I love the challenge. I love working hard to get that team that has a couple holes, because I've stacked heavy on a couple different positions and traded up for those positions, and then I work my ass off to get a running back that no one sees coming, like James Conner, into my lineup, and then watching everybody go, well, you won because of Conner. Yeah, no crap. That's the whole point. You land your running back, you land your breakout sleepers like that, your team blows up. You end the season with a team that people look at and go, how did you get that roster? When you show somebody like outside of the league, no one's going to give you credit in your league. But when you show somebody outside your league, look at my team, they're like, who do you play with, your grandma, your cousins? How did you get that team? That's what I live for. That's the challenge I love in fantasy football. That's how I build my teams most times, is through some aggressive stacking this way, stacking that way, having a whole, having somebody make some dumb comment. And in my buddy leagues, they every year, no matter, if you win over and over and over, whatever, they still rip you and say, oh, look, who you starting at your number 2 running back, and I've got a big hole there that I have to fill through the sleepers, and that's the challenge and the part that I love about fantasy football. Is Christian McCaffrey a sell high or a hold? I think in 2019, McCaffrey is a hold, but I think you do need to worry about the long-term effects of the usage and being, on the field 90 to 95% of the time for your team. They may scale that back and keep him healthier for the remainder of his, years coming up. But I think that he's definitely somebody I wouldn't worry too much about 2019. There's some concern of being overworked from last year. But I think that, good chance he can repeat, close to last year's numbers, be relatively healthy, miss maybe a game or two. I think that is kind of an expectation of mine. But missing a game or two is not that big of a deal for somebody that gets the kind of usage he gets, and you have somebody that steps in and plays really well. I'm going to end the Instagram live stream. So guys, get over to youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow to continue and watch the rest of this if you're watching this later, or to get into the live stream. All right, so I'm going to end that and dedicate my time to all of you on YouTube and talk a little bit more about 2019 fantasy football running backs, wide receivers, QBs, fantasy football busts, fantasy football predictions, fantasy football rankings, fantasy football everything. I'm here for you, waiting for more questions from you guys. Let me know what you have. Let's talk maybe some kind of trade talk. You try to find the next Kamara, Nick. Well, the next Kamara might be a rookie. You know, there are a ton of Devin Singletary, David Montgomery. I think these are two players that if they're in the right spot, they'd blow up and become your next Kamara. LJ Scott, you know that I like him. I know that you like him as well, Nick. In the right spot, and if healthy, could go nuts in the NFL at the NFL level. But he's a huge injury risk. I don't know that I see a lot of hidden gem Kamaras, you know, that level of players hiding in the current existing player pool in the NFL. But you never know when those guys emerge. Looking down the list of deep guys, I mean, you got Jerick McKinnon, who had some of that appeal heading into last year, and then he got hurt. You know, does he still have that appeal? You know, maybe at a very, you know, top 10 to 15 running back appeal at a very low cost? Sure. I mean, I definitely invest there. Damian Williams, could he be an absolute beast in 2019 or be holding a clipboard after the NFL draft? We don't know. That's why it's kind of a risky player to invest in. I think Mayfield explodes this year, goes from not rags, but semi-rags to riches in one offseason. I think you have a wide receiver. Let's see if there's any huge rags to riches potential. Calvin Ridley could go from you know, he's got high value, but I think he could be, especially if Julio gets hurt, Ridley on occasion, he'll finish with, I think, what will equate to low-end wide receiver 2 numbers, but he'll cost you a lot less. Don't invest in him that much or that at that price. But when and if Julio gets hurt, Calvin might have to step in and play like a wide receiver 1 for a string of games, which is why it'll vault his overall numbers at the end of the year up to that wide receiver 2 area. So I love him. Tyler Boyd has some huge monster appeal. And then I've talked about my boy, N'Keal Harry. Now, this is a dynasty prediction. I'm not saying we won't see flashes of this right away or at times. That's why I'm predicting this, because I think we will. Where he lands will determine a lot and how fast he grows. But he is one of those wide receivers that I think can be elite really anywhere he goes. Where he goes will determine how fast he gets there. Calvin Johnson survived in Detroit before he had any kind of consistent passing game. There are wide receivers that are able to still develop and become, you know, the best of the best, even in bad situations. But will N'Keal Harry become the best top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football within 1 to 2 years in a very bad spot? Maybe he is a year behind what I project. But I have him up on the sign all year long to remind people that he is my number 1 bold prediction, which I'm giving out for free to my audience on youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow and on Instagram at TheFantasyFootballShow. And I'm letting people know that that's my number 1 bold prediction. It's a dynasty-based prediction with a lot of redraft sprinkled into it because he's going to be, you know, really good right away, I think. But I think he has top 5 dynasty appeal within 1 to 2 years. N'Keal Harry, he's that good. And bold is how we roll, and that is one bold prediction, which I predict also will be, people will have a short memory on when he ends up becoming that good, because it's going to be, oh, he's one of the better wide receivers coming out, so not that crazy to think about. It's crazy. People have told me already that it's crazy. So I like it. That's how I roll. I'm not taking stabs in the dark. It's cold, calculated based on 15 years of experience and you know, yeah, a lot of it gut-driven. It's a lot of what I do, but there is some statistical analysis and other types of analysis behind a lot of what I do. It's not guesswork. N'Keal Harry, I believe, has the skill set, the ability, the frame, and I think hopefully the situation will be there too to make him a top 5 2 top 4 to 5 fantasy wide receiver in Dynasty in 1 to 2, maybe 3 years, depending on where he lands. Any other final questions from you guys before I jump off? I'd love to talk more about any trade offers or strategies you might have. I'm going over on, I'll be releasing a video on my top 8 running backs on YouTube. I posted on Instagram an image of those running backs, and we talked a little bit about it. I'll be doing a video on that top 8 talking about all the players ranked in my top 8 for running backs. I will do a QB version. I will do a wide receiver version. And then I'll extend all that out and make, the list longer, do top 10s, do a, 3-round mock draft and analysis in video format on YouTube. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please, and hit that bell so you get notified whenever I drop anything new and drop a bold prediction for you guys. I want you guys to know and be alerted right away. So, anybody have any other questions for me? Nick, you got anything? Let me see if I missed any other questions from you guys. I do think, again, can't stress enough not sleeping on Freeman and Henry. I can't stress enough not being cautious about James Conner as a top 7 to 9 overall pick in 2019, which I think is riddled and littered with risk, because you have Eddie Faulkner, the running backs coach now in Pittsburgh, was Jalen Samuels' coach at NC State, where he used Jalen Samuels a ton in the passing game, loves the guy, and you got him now as the running backs coach in Pittsburgh. That alone is kind of something to be concerned about. Then the fact that Jalen Samuels filled in nicely and did really well, just as well, if not, some would say better, in his short stint, replacing the injured James Conner, who broke down during the year, given the volume that was fed to him, that will be fed to him again, or any starter that Pittsburgh rolls out there. It's a workload that not a lot of running backs can handle. People don't realize how special Le'Veon Bell was in that offense. So, to me, I think the red flags are all over. And the part that concerns me the most is there's not a whole lot of public backing for James Conner. Imagine what is going to happen to his ADP if Faulkner or any coach on that Pittsburgh Steelers roster, the owner, anybody says, we've got 2 number 1 running backs on our team, and we're going to use them both. Imagine what's going to happen to James Conner's ADP. It's going to sink. It's like a stock that's at its all-time high, and people are wanting to buy in on it. I'm not saying to go sell $20 for $1 right now. I'm saying go sell your high of $20 for $20. Go get another player or 2 that equal the value that he's currently going at, not selling low, because people will buy. Conner is a high value right now. He's not doubted. It's not like Todd Gurley where he's a sinking ship. You may have to sell a little lower than you want to get out of that situation. This is a situation where Conner is like, he's gone up and he's leveling. You can get whatever you want for him right now. You could trade a future first rounder, if you picture that to be a later pick, and a James Conner, and get a Kamara. That's what I've done. I traded a second rounder because it was before the arthritis news broke, but I've been down on, or I did this with Gurley, mind you, traded Gurley for Kamara, and I just had to give up a second rounder. The same thing can be done with Conner, I believe, maybe using a first rounder that's not an early pick. So just somebody to avoid, I think. Mixon's another guy I have concern about. You have a QB, converted QB coach as an OC and a head coach in Cincinnati. A lot of 8-man fronts, I think, are waiting for Joe Mixon in 2019. Andy Dalton is the putty that's been given to these 2 QB coaches as their, future, or at least they're now. And you're telling me that they're going to have a smooth transition. This is Andy Dalton's, I believe, 3rd offensive coordinator in 3 years. I don't see a seamless, smooth transition into this new regime. And I think that, I like Tyler Boyd. I like A.J. Green. I think for the value, I think A.J. Green's got a late 4th round value, ADP. That's amazing. Tyler Boyd probably past that. These guys, they might be passing a lot, being down, and that could lead to a lot of fantasy production. So I'm not against drafting both wide receivers, but I do not like Mixon at his top 12-ish overall value, which he's creeping up on. I'm not against his talent. I'm not saying that he's going to for sure get hurt, but you have, and I'm not saying he's going to get into any off the field issues and try and predict something crazy like that. But you mix everything together with a changing offense, two inexperienced coaches that specialty is the QB, and you give them an unfair Andy Dalton as what they've got to build with. I don't know how everybody's so excited about Joe Mixon and that Cincinnati offense. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I wish it was September as well, Oliver, because I'm amped up. I'm ready. This is the kind of stuff we're going to do all the time. And I hope to do, if not a Saturday show, hopefully a Saturday and Sunday. We'll definitely do some live streaming on Instagram, pretty much all the time. But a live stream on YouTube, maybe a Sunday morning show to talk about, you got any start bench questions or, what news is going on. I'm ready to rock and roll. I've been doing this for 15 years. I just launched the Fantasy Football Show brand, which is why on YouTube we are growing. We are growing fast, but we are definitely new. And I'm glad that if you're watching now, you're a part of this from the building from the ground up approach with this new channel, and just trying to provide you the best fantasy football advice year round, and do what I've been doing for 15 years in a video format and radio format, because I've been doing radio for the 15 years. But the video is new. I love it. I think we're taking over already with the small space that we're in. And as we grow that space, I think we'll take over everywhere we go. Every stage we get to, I think I will be producing more content than most people. Let me move the mic closer. Sorry about that. I'll be producing more content than most people. And I'll be producing content I think that you guys are craving, because that's how I began in the industry, and that's what I want to deliver for you guys on a daily basis through video. So I'm excited to have all of you here. I'm excited to build this channel from the ground up. Donkey Cup, Nick, have you emailed me your address through the contact form? I need that. I think you want it, right? Yeah, you want it, Nick. So I think I've been waiting on that. Maybe you sent it and went into bulk or something. I don't know. But send that to me. We did a 24-hour live stream here on YouTube to kick off the channel. I'm not sure if you missed that. If you missed it, you can watch the replay of that. But I did a 24-hour straight live stream without a break other than to go to the bathroom for 1 or 2 minutes here and there. Probably. Nick, how many times did I go to the bathroom? Nick, I think I left like maybe 4.5 times. Half being to go get my monsters that Donkey Cup dropped off. Send it again, Nick, because I don't know why I didn't get it. Maybe I responded to you. I don't know. I'm sorry, I got a lot going on, but I'll definitely send it to you. But Nick, how many times did I take a break, a 1-minute break? Maybe 4 or 5 times. So during that 24-hour live stream, Nick won one of our prizes. So that's what Nick and I are talking about now. I'm thinking about doing another 24-hour live stream closer to the season. Doing that so early on, I think, was tough because... well, don't post your email in here. I think that was a tough thing to do. If anybody's ever talked to an audience for like 2 or 3 hours straight, it is tough. Staying up 24 hours straight is not that tough for me. I've been doing that my whole life, and I work, I believe, harder than anybody in the fantasy football industry, cranking out information. Now throwing video into the mix of something that I grind at 24 hours a day pretty much, with little breaks here and there, mixing in video. So I have no problem staying up late. I have no problem cranking out content, coming up with material. But to focus for 24 hours straight, your mind just goes crazy when you have to talk and entertain somebody and think about that audience and know that that camera's still on you. It was crazy. I might do it a little differently. Might actually take it out of the studio for certain sections of that live stream. So I'm going to definitely, I think, do it again. But I'm thinking more toward the start of the season when we've grown and have more of an audience going. Yeah. Your comment. He won the best comment. That's right. So anyways, I will, anybody has any more questions for me before I jump off here? I'm glad you guys jumped on, and it's been fun answering questions, talking fantasy football with you guys on youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow. Really hit a bunch of important topics already. I think Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell is probably the last one I'll leave you with, and I've talked about this a lot on my channel here on YouTube and on Instagram, but I think Le'Veon Bell's ADP is rising, so this is a little less relevant to him now that his ADP is climbing back up. It may sink. Maybe people are unhappy with his landing spot, and the ADP data hasn't shown his decline yet. But if he's falling in the 1.8 to 1.09, he's not really the biggest steal anymore like he was when he was falling into the second round, Le'Veon Bell, because the doubt is so strong around him. If you can get him at second round value, you're hitting a home run, potentially hitting a home run. Yeah, there's some risk. Yeah, he missed time. He's missed a whole year. He's been off. Maybe have gained weight. Sure. I don't believe the 260-pound story for a second. But sure, was he out of shape a little bit or whatever? Holding out an entire year is not the same thing as holding out 2 or 3 weeks into the season, not getting the contact, and coming in and tearing your Achilles, or pulling a hamstring because you're not prepared to go full force into the NFL season. These are two very different things, to hold out during the year and to hold out during an entire year and rest up your body. And we've never seen a running back at his level to be as elite as he is to hold out and then come back during his prime. He hasn't showed us any signs of decline. So this is for Gary Vee, Gary Vaynerchuck out there. I think Le'Veon Bell is going to turn heads in 2019, given the expectation. And I think Gary Vee would agree. I think he has the potential to be a top 5 running back, maybe even top 3 to 5, and yet he costs you probably the tail end of a first-round pick if you're lucky, top of the second, and take advantage of those ADPs and flow of draft to make sure you can hit that out of the park and get as little risk as possible built and baked into that value of Le'Veon Bell, rather than taking him as a top 3 or 4 running back. As a top 3 running back, he would be loaded with risk, and I would agree with you. Maybe it's time to pass on Le'Veon Bell if he's got that kind of value. But now that his ADP has fallen, just like I've said, people aren't recalibrating or adjusting. His ADP is still fallen into the 1.12 range, let's say, or 1.10. That affords you some risk in missed games or slow start or less yards per carry or maybe some less receptions. But the fact that he holds that potential to be a top 3 to 5 running back, even if you don't think it'll really play out that way, you've got to be able to admit that he at least holds that potential. He's shown no signs of decline. It's not like he declined like we have seen with Todd Gurley. If you can rank Todd Gurley in the top 7 still, why the hell can't you rank Le'Veon Bell in the top 5 when he hasn't even shown signs of decline? Yes, the offenses are different, but Le'Veon Bell is going to make that Jets offense a lot better. Right, Gary Vee? I mean, honestly, you're talking about a player that has proven nothing but being the elite of the elite and has shown no signs of drop-off. So back to Antonio Brown. Same thing, but with a value and ADP that is still so down in a range that there's almost no risk. Disappointments built into a late second, in some cases early first at 3.01. I've seen AB go that late. Antonio Brown at 3.01. But even if he's in a 2.08 to 2.12 range, sometimes in the higher range in a lot of drafts, if you have really crafty and knowledgeable fantasy football owners, you're still hitting a home run with very little risk. Because he could be a top 1, not top 5, top 1 to 5 fantasy wide receiver in 2019 and cost you a late second round pick. Absolutely can explode from his draft value. Insane value. Le'Veon Bell. I want to own Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown in a couple leagues together because it can afford me to build so many other great pieces around them. So that's what I got for you today. Thanks for joining me on this live stream. Visit sleeperu.com. Right here, sleeperu.com. And if you need rankings year-round, bold predictions, that's where you can find it at sleeperu.com. TheFantasyFootballShow.com is also where you can find these videos. You can also find me right here on youtube.com/TheFantasyFootballShow and Instagram. Very, very glad to have you guys here. Again, can't thank you enough for joining me. I can't thank you enough for being a part of Sleeper U, a part of the Fantasy Football Show, a part of the new growing channel, the video format of all of my work in video format here on YouTube, The Fantasy Football Show. We're just getting started, and I think you guys are going to love what you're going to see unveil as we go and head toward the months of April, May, June, July, and then, of course, August and September, when we're cranking out the best content in the fantasy football industry, in my opinion, and I hope in all of your opinions. Let's get it. Don't forget to use ADP, guys, to your advantage. ADP data, the key. Thanks for joining me.